I can't miss. Diamonds on my neck and on my wrist. Now they tryna get me out of mix. That's why me and bro, we don't mix.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Blazers Edge podcast. I am your host, Danny Marang. And well, this week I got a special guest from The Athletic, NBA analyst, former, I want to say, is it director of research for the Milwaukee Bucks?
Director of basketball
research.
Thank you.
My mistake. I got to make sure it's not just research, it's basketball research. Seth Partnow. If you want to get smarter about basketball, if you want to understand what analytics really are, I highly recommend follow him on Twitter. Probably some of the best threads out there over the years. I've stalked him for a long time. I've been trying to get him on the podcast for a while, and mostly just finally said, "Hey, man, you want to hop on?" And he said, "Yes." So, Seth, thanks for joining us, man.
Absolutely.
All right, so I want to get right into this. You put out an article the other day that was something that I've been kicking around a lot with other folks about, particularly Portland's offense, the whole idea of what is or isn't a good shot. And a lot of people probably know the general vagueness of what second spectrum is and how it's used, but do me a favor and kind of you've obviously at the NBA level worked with the type of software and machine learning and capabilities that are out there that aren't available on the public side. Can you kind of break that down for the listeners? What exactly it's aiming to accomplish?
Sure. So since 2013-14, the NBA has had started out as 4, is now 6 kind of special cameras in the kind of the gantry area, I guess, of every arena and the roof of every arena that essentially take 25 frames per second, get the position of all 10 players, horizontal, vertical axis looking down at the floor, and kind of so XY coordinates of all 10 players and XYZ coordinates of the ball. 25 times a second over the course of the game. And then from that, that's, called player tracking data. And then from that, a company called Second Spectrum out of Los Angeles is sort of the leading company. And they now actually are the league's raw data provider now as well. But they're sort of the company that has put the most kind of engineering time into really pulling out events from that what they call moving dots. And that allows you to see situations in a basketball game at a much more granular level than, obviously play-by-play, or even if you're familiar with Synergy, kind of the some manually tagged, film software. It allows you to go far deeper than that, and it lets you, let me watch every pick and roll in a game. Let me watch every pick and roll just where the defense iced the pick and roll, just where the defense iced and the ball handler shot, and, down all the way down. And within the confines of shot quality, I think anyone who watches basketball for any length of time, you have a good sense for what is and isn't a good shot. And with this sort of tracking data, you can actually quantify those things. And the things that make a shot easier or harder are basically exactly the things you think they would be. The closer to the basket you are, the easier the shot. The less you're moving when you shoot the ball, the easier the shot. The farther the defense is away from you, the easier the shot. A catch and shoot is easier than an off the dribble shot, and so on and so forth. And just using some, complicated but simple in concept algorithms to kind of measure what an NBA player, a quote unquote average NBA player would shoot on a given shot attempt, gives you kind of the expected effective field goal percentage essentially on a given shot, is I think the 2-minute description.
No, that's perfect. And I wanted to tag on one thing, because I think the diehards know what second spectrum is. They know what synergy is. I don't think they necessarily know what the divergence is. And you kind of laid that out. And you went into this at least a little bit in the article, but the understanding of like where an event happens, actually not in the article, but here when you're describing it, the difference in synergy is somebody's manually sitting there watching it and editing and saying, this is a pick and roll where the ball handler drove right, and that it's a sliding pecking order, slotting order, basically. It's event tracking.
Right.
And with Second Spectrum, it's once an event has happened, it's told, and this is where machine learning comes in. and you're telling it that's this event, and it now knows that when X, Y, and Z happen, that event is now logged, correct?
Yeah, that's pretty close. There's two pieces I think I would add on to that. The first is because of the way kind of Synergy operates, you're only getting kind of the situations that end a play.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're watching all of a guy's pick and roll possessions in Synergy, you're not watching every time the guy runs a pick and roll. You're watching
shot, pass, turnover.
Yeah, you're watching the play ending pick and rolls. Where if you're going to watch every time a guy runs a pick and roll in Second Spectrum, you're going to see the plays where a guy comes off a ball screen, kicks to the corner, nothing happens, and they reset and run offense again. But that's still a pick and roll that was run.
It matters.
And you'll see how a guy operated. Yes. And if I can, the second part of that is because this is more of an automated fashion. You talked about Synergy, someone is logging it. If you discover later that you've kind of been doing it slightly wrong, you have to go back and manually do it. Whereas if you figure out a way in these algorithmic kind of event identifying things, if you find out that you've been doing it slightly wrong and want to change something, you recode something, press a button, and not only does it get the one you're looking at, but it goes back to the beginning of time and updates everything. So it's very powerful in that way because, you know, as I learn a new thing to track today, I don't just track it going forward from today. I can look back to 99.5% of NBA games going back, 7 years and find every time that's happened in that time span. And
it's the whole idea of knowing what you're looking for. It's one thing to be looking at something simply. If you're looking for a pick and roll, but you're not looking for some sort of hesitation or a screener coming up and changing an angle, just that little minute detail all of a sudden changes how you may look or frame it. That it may have a new vernacular because of a way a screener is changing the angle later into the pick and roll. It's just something really minute and stupid, but it may actually matter about what they're trying to achieve in a goal. So you can make those adjustments and track those lines back. And that's what's really important, in that you can have that line of consistency all the way through, which is what I kind of wanted to get to here as far as how you laid out this article that you put together. Now we have the framework we're working in, which when we're talking about shot quality, particularly as you're pulling data from Second Spectrum. Who is shooting? Who is defending? What's the score? How much time is remaining in the game? How much time is on the shot clock? How tightly is the player being guarded? And then, like you said, you threw in here, for those who subscribe to the hot hand theory to some degree, how well has a player been shooting? Which we'll use that to springboard into a question a listener had about Carmelo Anthony here in a little bit. But under this framework, Seth, I want to shift this kind of towards the Portland Trailblazers, because over the years, Portland has had a pretty damn consistent offense, even without running sets and plays regularly. It's a flow offense where primary pick and roll, DHO action between CJ McCollum, Damian Lillard. And they are both guys that I think, or I'm almost certain, perform above expected shot quality quite regularly. Yes. Can you kind of go into why that is, what that is?
Yeah. So, for starters, generally speaking, stars have harder or describe it as lower shot quality than, other players, because if it is harder to, I have the ball in my hands, I'm going to create a shot for myself. That puts you in harder situations. The defense is, like, by definition, closer. You're more likely shooting a pull-up. You're probably moving into the shot more often. So yeah, the guys who are the high usage scorers tend to have lower shot quality. And then the good high usage scorers are guys who consistently outperform that low shot quality, especially guys like Dame to some extent. I mean, he shoots enough threes that his shot quality remains pretty high. Prior to this year, CJ took a lot of kind of tough mid-range shots, but was very good at them. Mm-hmm. So was a guy who also, like, had among the lower quote unquote shot quality in the league, but performed well above average because he's one of the the great shot makers in especially on, like, from the mid-range areas in the game today.
And you highlighted that in specific, though, not just CJ, but the way that bar needs to line up is you may have a league average shot quality, shot expectancy at certain spots on the floor, whether it's inside the paint, in the mid-range, at the 3-point line. But player-specific shot quality should vary, because you're dealing with different levels of shot takers and shot makers.
Yeah, and that's actually something that gets really complicated. I don't think anyone's really solved it very well yet, because you're basically, okay, what would a league average player shoot on this shot? Well, you've got for the vast majority of kind of shots you can come up with at this point, you have thousands and thousands of pretty similar shots that have been taken over the last 7-8 years. You start to get into the specifics, and it's okay, what kind of shot is this kind of shot for CJ McCollum? And then the more specifically you define that, the fewer of them there are. So you don't really know, like, okay, well, he's taken, if you want to, okay, a left to right crossover step back from 19 feet at the right elbow. How many times has he taken that shot in his career?
Yeah, the 100 of times versus the tens of thousands of times league-wide.
But what part of that shot is shots like that? Is it the spot on the floor? Is it the dribble move? Is there something else?
Is there a release angle? Which all this stuff is accounted for.
Right. But to figure out how to actually categorize that shot for an individual player in such a way to say, for CJ McCollum, that is a 53% shot. That's really difficult, because again, what is a shot like that for CJ McCollum? So the player specific models are much more difficult. So I kind of, as much as you would like to reduce it down to one number, I think it's at this point still, okay, that's CJ McCollum takes 45% expected shots from the mid range, but he's a +7 shot. And I'm just making these numbers up right now, but this is approximate, but he's a +7 in terms of his shot making on those shots. And that's a fuller way to describe him than to try to say that's a 52% shot for CJ McCollum, because you just don't know.
Basically, the delineation of player X is better than player Y by this much, just showing off what even the limited sample size. I think that the simpler way to kind of put a tag on that, at least.
You could have saved so much time. Yes.
I'm just trying to put this for me, because I understand a fair amount of this stuff. I mean, but being able to take so much information, which you literally did this for a living, and be able to put it in a usable form, the effort and the legwork that is necessary, or that has been necessary really over the last 15 years, as we've evolved from, 06 or 07 that the first second spectrum data started coming out on the public side?
Oh man, no, way later than that. I don't remember when the first sport view data, in terms of when it first became publicly available,
usable.
2013.
There we go.
2013-14 is when the league had tracking data on the entire league. There had been partial coverage of the league for a couple of years before that, but no one really knew what it was until around 2013-14.
I mean, do we know what it is yet?
Sort of. We know the shape, but we don't know everything that's inside.
There you go.
Yeah.
Keeping it Blazer specific, you talked about how much of the floor is usable, scoreable area, and with the exception of guys like Damian Lillard and Steph Curry, who have exponential range. Was it 1,250 square feet of area that you work with offensively? Give or take. You get into like, okay, how much of the area behind the backboard do teams worry about guarding? Do we count that or not? How far up the floor? Mike Prada and I were having a back and forth on this. Is like, okay, you can run offense by like, you set like a drag screen at 35 feet. The defense has to worry about that. Are they having to guard that area? And you can go either way on that. And so I was saying that more that the defense has to worry about defending that area just from the standpoint of where shots are likely to come from. The closer that you get to the rim, the more higher the expectancy for a shot.
Yeah, well, and just the more likely it is someone is to actually shoot. Like I said, there's guys who you even care about shooting at 30 feet, probably number somewhere between 2 and 4, give or take, whether you worry about Trae Young and Eric Gordon shooting out that far.
So when you're taking a look at guys like that, and how it pertains to Portland, What does having one of those guys who consistently will take, I think so far this season that Dame had taken, I believe 15, 30-foot plus threes, or made, 30-foot plus threes, heading into this, we're recording this before the Bulls game in the afternoon. So heading into game 18. So basically a little less than one a game.
And what is like, not to quibble, but I will. Depending on but depending on the data source you're working with, that 30-foot number is, if you're working from like NBA shot chart and play-by-play data, especially for a player with reputation for shooting from deep.
Are you saying that there may be some home cooking in those books?
It's a 30-foot, it's a 27-footer. It's deep, but it's not that deep. So I think you consistently find when you
not all logos are the same.
Yeah, no, but when you go from looking at like where stuff like that is recorded in play-by-play data versus where it is, recorded more objectively in kind of tracking data, you tend to find that there's a little fudging on the especially for shots that go in.
Oh,
you
no way.
Like, yeah, like I think that, let's put it that way, that logo shot is more likely to be a 27-foot three if it misses.
Interesting how that works in there. Yeah, well, I mean, I'd expect nothing less. I mean, these are the same bookkeepers that got Russell Westbrook more triple doubles than God. So it's a league wide. I wouldn't call it a problem, but it's a league wide trend. Let's go with that.
It's one of those things that, like, Damian Lillard can shoot from really far out and you have to guard him. Like, I think that's the takeaway.
And that's really what matters more than the actual distance itself. And that kind of springboards into what I wanted to get to here with the listener question. I want to make sure I get it right. At Scott PTB 30, he was really interested in asking about the whole idea of shot quality developing through one player in particular, and I'm sure some people are going to love this, and that is one Carmelo Anthony. And when we're talking about Carmelo Anthony, obviously we're talking about high usage, high volume, and working in a region that has been kind of marred as inefficient as far as the mid-range, when in reality, if you're good at it, it just doesn't matter. Like if you're CJ McCollum, if you're Kevin Durant, if you're Kyrie Irving, take the damn mid-range shot. It's that good for those guys. I could hear you warming up. What do you got?
It's okay for those guys. It's like the goal, like those guys, first of all, because of the shot clock, sometimes that's the shot you end up with.
Yes.
But also you get to that area to make the defense guard that area, to make the corners, to make the above the break, to make the basket area. Yeah. So it's sort of, it's a little bit of a Price is Right thing, where you want to take just enough mid-range shots so that they guard it without going over. And the guys who should take those shots more than others are your high usage stars, because they're going to be the best at those. And that's really, when you talk about the 3-point revolution, that hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. The shots that have become threes are, it's good I'm on a Trailblazers podcast, because the shot that's gone away, it's always in mind's eye, is Jerome Kersey taking a baseline 18-footer. that shot, like a catch and shoot 18-footer. Yeah. That shot's a corner three now. That shot's a wing three now, a catch and shoot wing three. It's the same, but it's the same kind of relatively limited players who have relied on someone else to create a shot for them.
They're just taking a step back.
They're standing in a different area of the court. The operating in the mid-range from your best player, that's only to the only extent that has changed a little bit is guys like Dame and Steph, who are now not operating at 19 feet. They're operating at 25 feet and can make that shot. But the star players are still taking those shots at very similar rates than they were 20 years ago.
And that exists because, like you said, you still need to bend the defense. Take a player like a Derrick Jones Jr., a guy who needs to kind of have a shot created for him. He may not be working that same 18-foot spot like Jerome Kersey. Instead, he is ducked into that dunker spot and running underneath that, behind that backboard and coming off those situations when a player like a Damian Lillard or a CJ McCollum is able to attack that mid-range and pull that paint defender out 1 or 2 feet and find something on a weak side or on a backside of a play. That's where that kind of stuff still matters.
Or for better or worse, he's shooting a corner three.
which it's taking away, even though that space is viable offensively as spacing exists, but the ability to use that space and not necessarily occupy it. Is that the proper way to frame it?
Yeah, I think so. It's, again, if you're not thinking about, I think talking about not occupying that space is, I think, the perfect way of looking at it, because, offense is not a static thing. It's players are moving. And so, you're using that space as a pathway to the basket, hopefully, as opposed to standing there.
Yeah. And that's, I think, kind of gets to where we're at with Carmelo Anthony. He got hot in a game. This is perfect as far as like the hot hand theory. Portland went to him, I want to say it was 6 straight possessions, and he scored on, I want to say 4 out of the 6, and then got to the free throw line of a 5th. When that kind of situation happens, we talk about Portland running their offense through that analytically and shot quality, everything is kind of looking at that. Is there a proper way to frame that to where you can kind of go back and forth between running an offense versus a mid-post isolation and consistently stay dedicated to it? Is there is there a way to quantify that?
I mean, I think you start to look at what shots the team is getting. I think the sort of his best years in New York were, Melo operated from the mid-post and everyone else shot a bunch of threes and layups. So that works fine. He's sort of he's almost like the Sineater for the offense, where he takes those shots and makes them at a decent enough clip so that teams.
So nobody else has to take those shots.
Nobody else has to take them, because teams rightly or wrongly react to him in that area. And I think, for Portland now and for where Carmelo is in his career, my guess is that most teams are going to be like, let him cook. If we're going to lose because Carmelo Anthony banged 6 straight jab step 19-footers. Okay. I think that enough coaches and enough teams are willing to be the house in the that's like, make or miss league. He made a bunch of shots. Good for him.
Which you kind of highlighted in the article, the whole idea of being able to differentiate between the make or miss league and how to get on that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So, I mean, it's essentially NBA players are good enough that they can make really hard shots at any given time. And some of even an NBA 3-pointer is far enough away that the best players in the league are going to miss it more than half the time. You got to make that. It's like, well, okay, that's like Seth Curry is the only player in the tracking data era who has made more than half of his uncontested threes,
which is obscene.
Yeah, that's, you think about that. That's I think that also speaks to the difference between shooting at game speed and just shooting around. You watch NBA big guys and
they all can. Dwight Howard, Steven Adams, they're canning threes in practice in warmups. That's guys that are non-shooters.
You spend enough time around an NBA court, you can make spot shots.
Yeah.
You go to the, you work in a front office, you get on the court enough. you can make spot shots. That's not, it's making them at game speed is a much different thing. But the point of that being, okay, the best players are going to shoot in the mid 40s on that. That means more than half the time they miss. Was that when they missed, was that your good defense, or is that just, it happened that time? You give them 10 of those shots, they're going to make 4 or 5 of them. Tonight they made 2. Is that you play better defense? Tonight they made 7. Did you play worse defense? No, just that happens. That would happen if you're flipping a coin. It happens with basketball shots.
That's variance.
Yeah, it's exactly. And, it's not from a, physics standpoint, it's not strictly random, but from the standpoint of what we can perceive, it's
random enough.
Random enough. Yeah.
So this kind of leads down 2 different paths. One, we're going to talk about overall 3-point shooting, luck and contests. Portland has been this year the team that has contested the least amount of field goals in the NBA, an unsurprising fashion. When you're fielding a 6'1" Damian Lillard, a 6'3" CJ McCollum, and then Enes Kanter and Carmelo Anthony, featuring for roughly 30 minutes a night, getting out and contesting looks, not something that you get a ton of, but also Portland, their defense this year with as much discussed changes, has tried to limit shots at the rim and shots at the 3-point line up, above the break, yet they're getting murdered in the corners. How can a team, and this is something that the Raptors and I believe the Bucks defensively try to do as well, but obviously they do it a whole hell of a lot better. Why is it so much more important, at least as far as contests and valuing shots in particular locations, or why have these coaches made these changes at least to want to basically value the middle of the floor more and not necessarily give up the corner three? Because I think it was you'd say that corner threes they're more often, was it 80% or more?
It's closer to 90% that
they're wide open no matter what.
Yeah.
And is that a function of an offense, or is that more of a function of a defense, or both?
I think that's primarily a function of just geometry. I mean, you think anywhere else around the arc, you probably have multiple guys who can rotate to that spot. If the defense breaks down to the point where guys are open in the corner, who's rotating to that?
You've got the 20-foot closeout pretty much no matter
what. You've got either the guy coming from under the basket, which is maybe not awesome, or you've got a guy like closing from, an angle to the side. Whereas anywhere else in the court, you've got guys at the nail, you've got guys at the elbow, you've got, a guy can come from the middle of the floor and close out to, anywhere.
With relative success.
Yeah. With a couple steps. Whereas the corner is just it's if you've come off the corner, it's a little bit further away. And also I think it's, you're not throwing the ball to the guy in the corner unless he's open. So those catches,
it's a little bit chicken egg.
Yeah, those catches tend to be more open because someone have to have pulled off the corner for it. Because you're in the corner, you're being guarded by two sidelines also, so you don't exactly want the ball there with defense also.
No, that makes sense as far as framing. Is that why? I guess I kind of perhaps answer that question at least. You see so many teams, good defensive teams, trying to take away more the middle of the floor, where the higher usage, higher volume offense is coming from, even though the higher expectancy return is in the corners.
It gets very complicated. I think giving up the corner three is much more often a function of having had a breakdown somewhere else, because if the guy's in the corner standing, you know where he is. If you're in kind of good shell defensive position, that's not a tough closeout. So what happened to draw you off of that position?
The rotation.
And so usually if you find a guy open in the corner, it's not the guy who's guarding the corner shooter who screwed up. There's a breakdown somewhere else that caused rotation, that caused that defender to have to help in the middle. Yeah. Or something like that.
Which is where we're getting towards with Portland having Carmelo Anthony and Enes Kanter on the floor defensively at the same time. Maybe just a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. Yeah. So, I think that there's kind of two different things. Like Toronto actually does give up a lot of corner threes for the most part since Mike Budenholzer has been there. The Bucks have actually not given up a ton of corner threes, given up more above the break threes, especially to kind of big guys who they've kind of okay, you can. We'll
live with this.
Yeah, we'll live with that. That's okay. And that calculation is made in large part because there are four things you're trying to do as a defense. Really, I mean, if you from a statistical standpoint, you get back to Dean Oliver's four factors. Is you're trying to hold down the other team's shooting efficiency. You're trying to force turnovers. You're trying to avoid sending the team to the free throw line, and you're trying to limit offensive rebounds. If you let the other team get to the basket, you might force a few more turnovers because there's more congestion, but you're going to foul a lot more and you're going to give up a lot more offensive rebounds. So by kind of protecting the paint first, you're first of all taking away the highest value area of the court it's your
foundation, essentially.
Yeah, from a shot efficiency standpoint, it's still like a dunk. A dunk is still the best shot, shockingly. So you're limiting that. You are not fouling. You're not giving up offensive rebounds. Against professional teams, will you take that trade-off over giving up a few more decent looks from three? I don't think that's a hard argument to make. Now, the question is for teams that are doing that, or do you go too far? Are you selling out too much to protect the paint, and now you're giving up too many shots above the break? And that's especially as teams are getting better at sort of manipulating defense and figuring out how to trigger the help to the middle, but that's really a fake. So it's like, oh, I'm going to the basket, just kidding. Here's an open three, and just kind of do that over and over again.
We've seen that a lot in Portland this season due to inconsistencies, I'd say, both in personnel availability and maybe some defensive philosophies of not everybody being on the same page, or
just not having I know we were going to get there, but I'll get there.
No, you're literally. I was going to get there right now.
It's like the Blazers have not good point of attack defense, which necessitates a lot of rotations. And part of what, again, to compare with the Bucks, you play an extreme drop scheme, you don't have to do a lot of rotation because, okay, the guy came off a ball screen and then he ran into Brook Lopez's chest. Everyone else stay home.
Which is a lot like running into a phone booth.
The guy came off a ball screen. A guy came off a ball screen. Someone died on a ball screen, so there's no rear contest, and they're going downhill at, Enes Kanter, or frankly, I think Yusuf Nurkic does some good things defensively, but Brook Lopez, he isn't as as an interior presence. That's a different thing. And then all of a sudden, okay, well, Robert Covington's a really good help defender, so he's going to come help. Now he's rotated off a guy. Now someone else has to, and then all of a sudden it's, the ball, ping pongs a couple places and a guy is shooting an open three. And it's not strictly because of the protect the paint at all costs philosophy so much as it is the other team got put in an advantage situation by the failure to guard that initial action with 2 or 2.5 players. And instead you're requiring 3 or 3.5 players. And now
you're doubling the output necessary to cover something. And that will break down basically after 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just not enough. There just is not okay, maybe you can rotate effectively some possessions, but if you do it over and over again, you're going to tire your guys out, and there's just going to be mistakes are going to get made, and you're going to give up more open shots than the next team, which is having to rotate and close out less often.
Now, getting into the coaching side of this, the scheme side of this, is there, and this is I think the question that I get more often than anything, we're talking about Portland coaching and this team in general in this era, the Dame Stotts kind of era. Is there any level, or let me phrase this better, where is the line essentially between where coaching and scheme stops and personnel starts? Where does that diverge enough to where is there a point to where there would be enough to cover up for those shortcomings at the point of attack?
I don't think a line is the right way of talking about it. You can nudge. I don't think that there's not sufficient defensive acumen in Portland's roster for there to be much more than an average defense.
Mm-hmm.
I think Robert Covington's a very good defender. He's not is a great on ball defender.
Yeah.
He is one of the best. I mean, he's 6'9" with super long arms and good timing and reading of the game to be able to get his hands on balls and steals and block shots and stuff like that. But
he's a weak side disruptor.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, but you've got Dame has never been a good defender.
Mm-hmm.
CJ has been okay at times in his career, but sort of the downside of him being so great offensively to start this year is if you're doing that much offensively, you're not doing as much defensively. That's demonstrable. It gets a bad rap, but playing good offense is hard work.
Mm-hmm.
People used to, they would oh, James Harden's lazy on defense. No, he's tired. He just had to do everything for that team on offense. And you would hope he would be less ostentatiously tired at times.
Hands on hips watching a possession versus at least and looking remotely engaged.
Yeah. And there were times in Houston where he stood productively, I guess is the way I'd put it. And he's done so for more often in Brooklyn. But the point is he, you know, you guys doing that much on offense, he's not going to be a stopper. It's just not.
Especially when you're talking about Portland, where you've got limited size. It's the difference between Giannis working his ass off at 7 foot, God knows how much. What is he, 260?
Yeah.
I mean, he can just by his general
the ball
size.
Either.
Yes, he's a weak side guy as well, but because of his size, he can be more impactful when he does take those rest opportunities. And that's something Portland is not afforded with their lineup structure.
Right. And then, you know, and you know, Derrick Jones can do some things defensively, but again, he's not he's put in some weird matchups because is he guarding the 4? Is he guarding?
That man is guarding everybody on a nightly basis.
Yeah.
He has gone from guarding, you know, at point of attack when they're going 3-2 or 2-3, where he's not only up top, but funneling and chasing, which is fundamentally breaking his own because he has to. But I'm giving Derrick a pass because you want to talk about Carmelo Anthony being the sin eater of the Blazers offense when those mid-range shots. Derrick Jones Jr. has been the sin eater for them defensively, especially with all of the injuries. And even he's going to be out tonight. Right. He has done enough, at least for me. Like, I'm going to pull this one back real quick and then we'll get into some Covington stuff. But Derrick Jones Jr. and Robert Covington, there's a lot of people that have been disappointed in them defensively. And you've highlighted here Dame's ineffectiveness, CJ's ineffectiveness, and obviously Ennis Cantor, who tries hard, but it just doesn't have the mobility or the size. Melo has, for the most part, not cared on that end of the floor for the majority of his career, and definitely as much so in Portland. But asking those two guys to try to cover up for the mistakes at the point of attack, and then even when Nurkic was playing, he wasn't the Nurkic that was in the bubble, let alone the Nurkic that went down with a broken leg. Like that use of Nurkic from January to March in 2019 was the best version of him that we'd ever seen. He was phenomenal as a rim deterrent, eating up in the paint, but he was playing off of guys like Harkless and Minu, and those guys looked really good alongside him. Derrick and Covington haven't had the opportunity to either play with Dame or CJ at their best defensively. They've, like you said, they both regressed. And then not ever having a paint anchor that really was even in shape yet hasn't allowed those guys to be what they need to be, which I think is not necessarily a bigger problem for them, but how those guys are then being utilized and how they need to be utilized to cover up again for the sins of the others. Does that?
Yeah, no, I think over his time in Portland, Terry Stotts has preferred sort of a pretty conservative scheme. Mm-hmm. And I think it actually, in many ways, worked best with Robin Lopez almost. Just to okay, I'm not going to come out to you. You're going to run into me, and you're going to fall down because I'm enormous. Like that's and
they also had more length in that time period too, because they had LaMarcus, they had Batum, and they had West. You didn't have smaller players up and down the lineup.
Right. No, and I think that's fair. And I think exactly like Aldridge as a 4 was an injury, like especially before the league went primarily with spacing 4s, mm-hmm. was a very solid defensive addition, especially considering he got every rebound because Robin Lopez knocked everyone down.
He boxed out an entire team. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, and I think Nurkic can be a part of a good defense and sort mm-hmm. of a poor man's Marc Gasol kind of way.
Can you see him being a paint anchor if he returns to health? And like, is he going to be is he enough?
I mean, he can be sort of big and in the way, but he's never been he's never really been an above average rim protector in and of himself. Mm-hmm. So again, in a otherwise solid defense, he could be a good positive cog because he reads the game well. He's got better feet than he's given credit for, and he's got good hands. Mm-hmm. So he can do some things defensively. It's just if you're opening the gate and turning the dogs loose, go run downhill at him, like you're
trying to make him flip his hips at the free throw line is a suboptimal move.
Yeah. I think that's that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you tell I've watched a few of these games? Now my guy, Lord Covington, has been getting getting a lot of crap because he can't find the bottom of the basket right now. I've been asked over and over and over and over again over the last 6-7 games, are you worried? Are you worried? Are you worried? Tell me why I shouldn't be worried, Seth.
Okay. No, like anytime a guy goes 20 games and doesn't make a shot, and exaggerating, you want to be a little worried.
Well, you're not far off. He's about 15. So
yeah, but by a lot of stuff, first of all, he's a pretty low usage player. So as long as, like, from an offensive impact standpoint, as long as teams are still guarding him, he's actually still having a decent, like, he's helping the offense in some ways that way. And like the percentage of shots that go in, they matter, of course, but that becomes a bigger problem if teams just stop guarding him, which I'm not seeing any evidence of that happening. Just in terms of his shot profile, he's long been a guy who's taken like some of the harder mix of threes in terms of shooting with close defensive attention, and that's still happening. It just neither his open shots nor his contested shots are going in as well as they have for most of his career, and that happens. The question is, like, it's not unheard of for the wheels to just fall off for a guy, and he's not a spring chicken. So
if he's not a spring chicken, what the hell does that make us?
Yeah, well, but a strong voice is good old man skills.
There you go.
So you worry about it, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, we've got 6, 7, 8 years of a guy being a solid, if not elite shooter, versus a month and a bit of cold shooting.
The only hesitancy I have here, because I'm probably 95% of the way with you here, is that his time in Houston was also pretty similar to what we've seen here as far as some inconsistency. And he's never been a guy who is, a metronome and just tick, 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 and you just kind of count on him. He's had some variance certainly within his games, but if there's anything that makes me pause for a split second, is this perhaps the beginning of a downtrend as he gets older?
I mean, we're in Houston, we're talking a not huge number of shots.
Mm-hmm.
He got there and played 8 games or something before I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was, he did not get like a full run in Houston before the league shut down. Mm-hmm. And then, we can talk about the weirdness of stats from the bubble or not, but just come go with me that they were weird. And I'm not sure what
the research on that in 10 years is going to be fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, no, if you want to take over his last 250 shots, it's been not pretty. That's not that much still.
Especially when you look at his volume over his career.
Right.
It's not a blip, but it's enough to go, okay, but press on.
Like, okay, he shot just under 28% so far this year from 3. Like, is he going to shoot 40% the rest of the way? No, he's never done that for a season. Is he going to shoot 34, 35, 36 the rest of the year? Yeah, I think that's a reasonable expectation. Now that means he's going to end the year shooting about 32 or 33, which, is not awesome. But again, as long as teams are guarding him, that matters more, because he is a very low usage player. Who
fits into just about any scheme in the league. So
right.
the value in his je ne sais quoi, let's say, on the basketball court stands out, as long as, again, and this kind of even ties back to the Carmelo Anthony stuff, as long as people are paying enough attention within that particular moment, is it okay? Does it matter? I want to kind of wrap it up with this. You have said Portland's a bit of a hard watch right now with all of the injuries and everything that's kind of going on.
Tough hang.
It is. And I mean, even for me, it's there's so many things you have to put qualifiers on, and moral victories, and those, like, you're looking for the little things. Is there anything that Portland can do in general to basically stem the tide to make it to the point where they will be okay enough when they get when they get CJ back, when Derrick is back and Covington's back. Basically, 4 of their 5 starters
John
back.
Collins. Is that, anyone remember him?
Zach Collins.
Zach Collins.
Trust me. You say John Collins, and you're gonna make everybody's eyes and light up in Portland. But that's the thing.
Sorry, yeah.
No, it's okay, because that's more often than not people are telling me that they took the wrong Collins. So, but
I like Zach Collins if he could stay healthy. I think he's
a rotation level player. There's no doubt about that.
I know. I mean, if you like, he is more of he I think projects to be more of a rim anchor than Nurkic would be.
Interesting.
Yeah, again, assuming health, which is that's sort of a tough spot to be in, because a rim anchor is also a little bit of a crash test dummy. So a guy who can't stay healthy is like, but yeah.
Again, you're talking about Portland right now. Over the last 4 games, has missed at one point or another 4 of their 5 starters.
Yeah,
that's
you lose. That's how it works in the NBA.
Right. Then I'm getting some people because I think they're tired of this era. It's been good. Don't get me wrong. But they're becoming too familiar in that. Coaching is the bigger problem right now, that somehow you can coach up Carmelo Anthony, you can coach up Enes Kanter, you can coach up Damian Lillard and Gary Trent Jr. and Anthony Simons and Nasir Little and Harry Giles, and they should win games. Please explain to people why that's not true.
I mean, you're welcome to think that. It's just, the NBA is a talent league, and if you're operating in a talent deficit, like, you don't win. Like Damon said, like how well did, before Draymond came back this year, how well did Steph Curry and some guys, how good did that look for Golden State? Those are
what 9 games of just pure drudgery.
Yeah. So it's like, and I think probably people in Portland are tired of having Dame compared to Steph negatively. But that's
the straightest line you can draw between 2 guys in the league when you're talking about that level.
Yeah, it's like Dame and some guys is not a good team. It's just not. I don't know how to and there's some of those guys are I kind of wonder, like, should we be seeing more Gary Trents?
I mean, that's true even before the injuries.
Yeah,
like he should be.
And not that he's like, who's the quote unquote better player between Trent and somebody else. That's not really the point. It's again, you're starting with, if you're penciling in Dame and CJ as your first 2 starters, who's guarding the ball? Okay. Well, Gary Trent probably is not probably. I think it's fairly safe to say that Gary Trent is a significantly better point of attack defender than either of those 2 players. So maybe that is like, and plus he's a better floor spacer than Derrick Jones. So maybe that makes more sense. But that's like, again, that's a quibble.
The moving in the margins.
Yeah. It's in like big picture, you don't have enough available talent. And there doesn't seem to be like, at a certain point, you just kind of accept where you are. And then you like, okay, we're probably not going to win some games. So let's make these losses productive.
Which is in turn, you're seeing 25 to 28 plus minutes a night for Gary Trent Jr., for Anthony Simons, for Harry Giles, for Nasir Little.
And by the way, like, even if those, like, that's valuable, even if those guys are bad.
Mm-hmm. If they're bad.
Yes. If Nas Little plays 25 minutes a game and stinks, that's a better outcome than him riding the bench the rest of the season. Cause you can make the actual decisions.
Yes. Because that's a position that Portland is in right now, is Zach Collins. They do not know if he is a backup big or a starting big, because he is not going to play basketball for essentially 2 years.
Yeah. And that's not a fault of that's not a choice
of anybody. That's a problem that they have run into. And that's why that kind of intel matters.
Yeah, no, just like being able to, and I don't want to call this a lost season for the Blazers or anything like that.
I mean, it's bordering on it. It really is.
And you know, if you want to take some solace and say, well, it's because we got whacked by the injury stick, fine, whatever
2
helps
years
you
in a
sleep
row.
at night. Yeah, whatever. I mean, it happens. You know, if you flip a coin, it lands tails twice in a row, one time in 4.
Not in Portland. That coin lands that way a lot in Portland. I don't know if you know.
Well, I mean, you know, every fan base thinks they're cursed except for the Lakers, who, you know,
I know.
were born on third base, but we won't talk about that.
No, Lakers slander is always appropriate here, Seth.
Where was I? No, so yeah, no, like if the season is bordering on that, then yeah, like you need to get something from these games, and like figuring out, like, is Harry Giles someone we want around? Is Anthony Simons, like, you know, a guy who we should be talking about, like, you know, contract extensions with? Is, you know, what is Gary Trent's next deal look like? What, like, you have to figure these things out. And, you know, and deciding that this is something that across sports, and certainly across the NBA, there's a little bit of a sunk cost fallacy, and like, well, we've invested so much in this guy, we can't cut bait. It's like, no, you invested a lot, you learned what you could learn, and you know, hopefully, you know, we gave it a shot and didn't work out, and hopefully you catch on somewhere else and it's great. You know, hopefully
go with God. There's not enough of that in a league.
No, you know, I mean, the guy you from a Blazers standpoint, you look at and you say that was Will Barton.
Yes, and that's probably the one guy legitimately in the last 10 years that they probably would have wanted back.
I don't know if he even wanted it back. You made a move to you know, shore stuff up for the playoffs, and if I remember correctly, that
it was a flawlow.
Yeah, it was a flawlow, and that trade like happened like right before Wes Matthews blew out his
I think it was
which
3
basically
weeks.
Yeah, which basically ended that season for that team. You know, so that's unlike, well, yeah, no, he wasn't going to figure in your plans. And, you know, I actually wrote an article about this at the time because John Feinstein wrote a book, I don't know, 20 years ago, talking about like a year in the life of the PGA Tour. And the part I found the most interesting about that book were when he was talking about the guys who are kind of grinding for dollars to try to make cuts to finish just high enough in the money list to keep their tour card for the next year. And that's what I thought of when, you know, Will Barton got traded to Denver and got some minutes kind of at the tail end of his like rookie deal to prove that he should stay in the league.
So that he should get the money. Yeah.
No, just to prove he should stay in the league and not have to go to Europe or not have to go to the G League, and just, you know.
And how many guys that doesn't work out for?
Yeah, but just getting that chance. So, and he was never going to get that chance on that Blazers team. And
no,
so you don't
CJ McCollum wasn't getting that chance on that Blazers team.
And so you don't say that, oh, we wish we could have that one back. It's like, no, he wasn't going to get a chance here. He got a chance, and good things happen for him. Good for him. But you've got guys and opportunities for guys to get that chance and see now, and passing that up to ride veterans into the sunset isn't
who aren't going to give you. I mean, the expected rate of return on those guys has a pretty definite ceiling that you know what you're going to get. And this is, I think, the last question I'll ask you, just overall, when it comes to the young guys versus veterans. Terry Stotts is a guy that has favored veterans pretty much throughout his entire career here in Portland. It's not until usually your third year that you get on the floor and you get a lot done as far as a young player. When you're looking at a Carmelo Anthony, a Rodney Hood, Enes Kanter, those guys getting those additional minutes. Holistically, when you look at that, why would a coach decide to go with that over the young guys? And like, what does that rate of return actually look like? Does that make sense? It's a horribly phrased question.
No. So there's a couple things going on here. Like, first of all, like, it's not, I don't think it's purely a coaching thing. It's an organizational thing. So, you know, you have priorities as an organization, and that's generally like generated kind of at the ownership level,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps at the GM level. And so there's some priorities. And so like those kind of in some ways dictate to a degree, like your preference between like living with rookie mistakes and going with the, you know, the devil, you know, almost of a veteran that has flaws, but at least you can count on him to be flawed in specific ways.
You know what the flaws are and when they're going to pop up.
And certainly from, I would say in general, coaches tend to be control freaks. And so, that sort of the guy who maybe doesn't bring much to the table, but doesn't take anything off the table either, is preferable to them, to the guy that's maybe does some things, but is a little wild. And, you know, between veterans and young players, I think generally speaking, you kind of know who falls into which category. So there, and then there's also like, you know, stuff that on the outside we aren't privy to, which is kind of the preservation politics of these organizations. And this is, again, I have zero information about anything that's going on.
This is grand scheme general.
Yeah. So this, and those, by the way, that's both you know, front office and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it depends on like, what are you getting judged on? Like you can, you know, your coach, okay, I need to win these games so I keep my job. The GM, I need these guys to play well so my moves look good.
Mm-hmm.
So there's those like those kind of pressures can come into play also. So it's not, there's a lot of.
Are you saying that it's not as simple as just play the young guy because the old guy isn't good?
No. And then also, I mean, and frankly, especially for a team where that has like as strong like a leadership as like, you know, what Dame wants is going to carry a lot of, and rightfully so, by the way, is going to carry a lot of weight. So if Dame is saying, you know, I'd rather play with Carmelo than Anthony Simons, you know,
that's how it's going to go.
Yeah, that certainly wins the tiebreaker.
I mean,
so
that's the whole thing. Is like you've been in an organization where you've seen these kind of dynamics at play. It's not, when I say it's, you know, this, that, or the other thing, it's these are the things that happen within organizations, not just the Bucks. This is league wide. There are different levels of ownership engagement, GM engagement, coach engagement. There are coaches like, I don't know, Pop, Spo, guys who have long tenured and title back, that their weight carries more than another coach. There are GMs who are more heavy handed. There are GMs that take a step back and take things into consideration. And all of those things all encompass how, and I've heard this a lot. What do you mean? In response to when I've offered an answer like this, well, he's the coach. He gets to decide who plays and when they play and who they play with. And
okay.
Is that true?
I mean, it's like on a micro level, it's true. On a macro level, a
little bit ubiquitous.
Yeah. In any given night. Yeah. You know, it's the Moneyball references are probably, you know, overdone, but it's like, you know, lineup card is yours, but you can't play Payne at first base. It's like, but what are you talking about? I just traded him. Like you know, that's, you know, again, like if tonight Terry Stotts wanted to play Anthony Simons 40 minutes, he could do so. If that's not the organizational plan, he's going to hear about it at, you know, if the game ends at 9:30, he's going to hear about it at 9:32.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and, you know, so there's a certain kind of equilibrium that gets reached or doesn't. And when it doesn't, those are kind of the situations you read about, which hasn't really happened in Portland that I can
remember. Which has been one of the most consistent strings that we've had. Even when things have happened behind the scenes, they have very seldomly reached public knowledge.
Yeah, like you're not a situation where you're hearing about a coach kicking a GM out of practice, which, you know, you occasionally read about in other places. So, you know, yeah, there's
levels to this stuff.
Yeah, everyone working well together is valuable, even if it doesn't always lead to the best individual decisions. That might, I'm right and you're wrong. okay, well that worked this time, but that's
How
no
about
way
next
to run a
time?
railroad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I don't want to take up any more of your time because I've already gone way over what I asked you for. I could do this all damn day. Thank you for coming on, Seth.
Absolutely.
Please plug anything, everything, podcast, writing, whatever you've got going on.
Just check out my stuff on The Athletic. Follow me on Twitter at Seth Partnow. Kind of at this point, the regular features I have at The Athletic is I write kind of a quick look around the league on Tuesdays, touching on a number of topics that kind of float my fancy at any given time. My podcast, Nerd She Wrote with Dave Dufour and Mo Dakhil, drops Friday mornings. And I just started the series that we spent a lot of time talking about shot quality. Did the intro piece. Was today Saturday? Oh, man.
Yeah, it's Saturday. Trust me. Trust me. I'm doing
yesterday. I dropped the intro piece to that yesterday, and gonna continue on with that series over the next couple of weeks. On Fridays, we're talking about like defensive shot quality, different ways to measure it, individuals, players for whom it does and doesn't matter, and a number of other topics that I can think of as we go through. So, yeah, those are some of the things to look forward from me in the coming weeks.
Awesome. And thank you, man. And just a quick note on The Athletic, guys. Technically a competitor to mine at NBC. I don't care if you've got the financial means, and they do what is it, $1 a month deal pretty regularly, Seth. You guys have the
pretty regularly. I honestly, I keep track of what the current deals are. I should. It's bad commerce by me.
Listen, hey, I lose track of what game days are. The more you're into it, the harder it is to keep track of things sometimes. But if you've got the opportunity, guys, go. If for nothing else for Seth, if you've got the Blazer centric focus, Jason Quick does incredible work too. He does some of the best like personal pieces, the behind the scenes stuff, the understanding the mentality of guys, in particular the one he just put out about my guy Ant Simons, his mental development to go along with his skills. Go invest in it. Seriously. Stop screwing around with it and support journalism as it were in what is certainly weird times. Again, Seth, thank you for joining, man. I really appreciate it. Go follow him at Seth Partnow on Twitter. Subscribe to the podcast at The Athletic, also with friends of the show with Dave and Mo. And for everybody else, thank you for listening. Like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you are. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
I can't miss diamonds on my neck and on my wrist. Now they trying to